Good evening, my ghouls and goblins. Welcome to Insomniac. I am your host, Miss Red, and tonight we have a very, very special, near and dear to my heart subject for you. So, let me ask you, what do you think of when you think of witches? Do you think of cauldrons, maybe? How about crystal balls to see your future? Maybe you think of weird, creepy, and strange things in jars. Weird, dusty jars. Well, all of these wonderful gimmicks and things are awesome and dandy, but the truth of witches is actually a lot more damning and a lot more scary. So, we have for you weird facts about witches. Oh, by the way, for any of you practitioners of witch or pagan history out there, Merry Ostera to you guys as of the 19th through the 22nd. Many practitioners know there are 8 major holidays through the calendar. And as a practitioner myself, wishing you guys Merry Ostera. Yay! Happy springtime. A little bit of introduction. Now, most of what I'm going to cover is going to be about Western culture, like Northwest Hemisphere witches. There will be some little things about witches in other places, but most of it will be more Northwest semantics because that's where the most horrendous things happened. So, the word witch comes from an old English word, and it is witchcraft. Okay. Wicca is the masculine. Witche is the feminine. Okay. And it means a skilled or clever person that practices sorcery, right? So at least that's what my Book of Shadows says. So the main subjects of study for these people are usually theology, religion, folklore, technology, science, diabolism, and of course, sorcery and magic. Because before things really started taking off with science and technology, anything that was considered a mystery was considered magic. And there were tons of things. Almost everything was a mystery. So people got very superstitious about it. But yes. So our first fact. There are witches in every faith and every culture. They could be called sorceresses, or witch doctors, or medicine healers, or priestesses, or priests, or, they're known by many, many names. But their functions, shamans, their functions are pretty much the same thing. So, every faith, every culture practices magic. Even going into the Abrahamic religions with prayer and consecration of the temple and the Holy Sacrament, those are all things that were derived from rituals and practices of when paganism was a big thing. The blood of Christ, body of Christ. We take this Holy Sacrament, we sing a song, we do a prayer. Everybody practices method. So, creepy, weird, and strange fact, because there's a decent amount of the religions out today that don't really think of it that way. Number 2. Most people convicted of witchcraft were not only innocent, but they weren't burned. Okay? So we're talking about the particular era of like the 1400s until the 1700s. Now, there were almost 100,000 people that were killed convicted and killed as witches during this particular point in time. However, the idea of the witch being burned at the stake has been more dramatized via Hollywood just because it's more spectacular on camera than hanging, which is how most people were killed at that particular time. was by hanging, by stoning, some of them by drawn and quartering. There's only been a handful of times that it was documented that a person was actually burned for being a witch. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, wood was not cheap. It's not cheap today. It wasn't cheap then. Okay? And people would much rather use that wood for their cooking fires and to build their castles and their armaments and all that sort of thing than to use it to burn tens of thousands of witches. Okay? Wood is expensive. Wood takes time and a lot of craft, even firewood. So, yeah, very practical reason why the whole burn the witch isn't really accurate. All right, number 3, King James. King James the First, the writer of what we know as the modern Holy Bible. Okay, he commissioned to have the most infamous witch hunt manual in his name. Okay, you have to understand something about King James the First. King James the First was a smart man, but he was also a little bit crazy. He was like 4th generation incest, as many royals were back then. And he went to go collect his queen from across the sea, and her name was Isabella. Well, a storm came out of nowhere and threatened to sink his ship. So he was late collecting his bride-to-be. Okay? And instead of thinking, oh, okay, the sound there, the strait between England and the mainland, because of how it's shaped, always has weird freak-ass storms, and this is just how it is. It was like, no, it was witches, it was demons, it was this. And so this started this forensic panic as an excuse to anyone that seemed to have powers of the divine or something beyond what should be humanly capable for anybody but the church. Yeah. We're going to go after them. We're going to take them out. So yes, he wrote this book. He approved it. Most of it was written by bishops and priests that he had assembled. Probably the same, like 60 or 70 gentlemen that wrote the Bible for him, wrote his version of the Bible. And he probably skimmed through it with his advisors and then signed off on it. Okay, this sounds good. This sounds awesome. So yes, but he wrote this thing called the Malleus Maleficarium. Okay? And you can get copies of this thing. Yes, that's Latin. I forget what the English translation is for those two words, but that's something you can look up if you're interested. But yeah, it has kind of basic instructions on how to capture witches and demons, how to identify witches and demons, just all that sort of thing. So yeah, go King James. Number 4. In reality, there was no real rhyme or reason to being accused as a witch. Okay, so when all of the horrible witch trials and stuff went down, as is the case in most countries, so for example, the eradication that happened in Haiti, the eradications that happened in Russia and Czechoslovakia, all of these places, America, there wasn't any rhyme or reason as to who could be labeled a witch. It could be, oh, your neighbor's got a mole. So that's the sign of what they called a witch's teat, which is they would have familiars, which were pets that are actually demons in animal form that were sent to them by the devil to be able to talk to the devil back and forth directly. Okay, that's the point of familiar, and the familiar helps them out with their stuff. Well, how these demon familiars ate was they suckled on this witch's teat. And supposedly this witch's teat could be a mole, it could be a beauty mark, it could be a boil, it could be a wart, which is horrible because, you know, syphilis and all that sort of crap was still very prominent back then. So the likelihood that people would have skin imperfections was super high. Yeah. So, and, you know, it could be something as simple as, oh, she knew to use rosemary on the chicken last Sunday at the Sunday supper. Oh, she's using potions and herbs and she's poisoning people. She's a witch, you know? Or, you know, oh, my neighbor's cattle. His cattle is always better than mine, always more thick and plump. So he must be using witchcraft, you know? It just, all these stupid, crazy things. In fact, the majority of the Salem witch trial specifically ended up, it was a political struggle between two great families in Salem. And they both wanted to pretty much own Salem. So they were blaming each other on witchcraft. And it wasn't until the governor, I think it was the governor of Virginia, came up, and his wife was accused. It wasn't until then that it was like, okay, this is horse crap. Enough is enough. You guys need to stop it. But anyway, I could go on for days about this stuff. And how insane people were when they accused people of being witches. And that's just, you know, that's just the practical things. You can read, there's tons of books more of court testimonies of what people claimed they saw people do, like having relations with the devil in the woods and flying and all this sort of crazy nonsense. The last person that was accused of being a witch was accused in the 20th century. There's a lady, her name was Jane Rebecca York, okay? And she got this great idea because at the turn of the century, late 1800s up until like the 1950s, a practice called spiritualism was really, really big. It was huge. Why? Because there were wars going on. There was famine. There was drought. There was all sorts of crazy stuff going on in the world. Excuse me, that people were dying at an exorbitant rate. You know, World War I, World War II. You got the Spanish flu. You got all sorts of different things. The Great Depression. All sorts of things going on that are causing people to die at an exorbitant rate. And so people wanted to find solace. They wanted to find connection with their deceased loved ones. So they committed and kind of created this subset religion called spiritualism. And spiritualism is based on the prospect of talking to the deceased to find out the answers of different things. Okay? To tell the future, to find things that are lost, whatever. Excuse me. So Jane Rebecca had this brilliant idea that, like the Watts sisters during the Victorian era in the 1890s and 1900s, that she would put on a little show. And so she had tables that were specially built to rock and turn and all this kind of stuff. She had rooms that were specially built where pictures and mirrors would fall off the walls, this, that, and the other. Okay. Well, somebody discovered her little house of horrors was not what it seemed, but a trick. Okay. So she was brought to trial, and she was accused as a witch because she was defrauding people with phony seances. So people by that point in the 1940s, because at that point the OTO and Aleister Crowley and all that had come along, And so people were getting more educated on alchemy and what real magic looks like, I guess, so to speak, like real ritual magical practices. And so people were furious to find out that this woman had been scamming people who were just so sad and desperate for answers for their loved ones, you know? And so, yeah. And no, she wasn't executed, although that was tossed around because she scammed so many people. She was actually fined 500 pounds, which for the 1940s was a decent amount of money, but still. So yeah, 1940s. Last time somebody was fouled and convicted and went to jail because she did spend, like, I think it was 2 years in jail and had to pay a fine of $500. So yeah, so pretty recent history. All right, number 6, the peaked hat that we all know and love. That's the witch's hat. This is so jacked up. I don't know if I'll wear the peaked hat again. I think I'll stay with my cloak hoods. You know, stay with the traditional pagan culture robes. Because the peak hat is not witch originated, okay? But Jewish. Yeah, anti-Semitic. In 1215, Pope Innocent III, this guy was a piece of work. Pretty much anybody that wasn't willing to bow toe to the Catholic Church, he wanted them dead. Or he wanted them enslaved. Okay? So his wonderful idea, because people have pretty much hated Judaism and people who practice it since Jews became Jews, honestly, which I think is crazy. But Pope Innocent III convinced Rome that the Jewish community had to wear Judean hats. And these hats kind of look like a dunce cap. And they must be worn to identify the enemies of the church. And then, of course, later that expanded to anybody that, you know, practice a religion other than the traditional Abrahamic Christianities and witchcraft and paganism. So yeah, it's like I read that and I'm like, you just ruined my childhood. Oh, so yeah, my peaked hats are going in the trash. Number 7, flying with Mandrake. So yes, there are rumors about witches flying on brooms, and there's actually documentation of people admitting that they flew on brooms. Okay? There's a couple of ways that this could be kind of true in a certain perspective. So, Mandrake Root. Okay? Mandrake Root is kind of along the nightshade family. So nightshade is like tomatoes, the belladonna, potatoes, that sort of thing, okay? And one of the main characteristics that eggplant, all of these types of plants have atropine in them. And atropine is, it's a compound that can make you hallucinate, okay? Mandrake happens to have quite a bit of this compound, and also compounds called scopolamine, okay? And so, you know, they would steep it and make tea out of it, and then they would drink it, and then they feel like they're flying, okay? Because in small doses, yes, it will make you hallucinate and give you a high like you're flying. Large doses, it'll kill you. So that's why Mandrake, the members of the nightshade family that are high in atropine or scopolamine today are usually illegal in the United States at the very least, such as belladonna, aka deadly nightshade, and Mandrake. But yeah, so the other thing is there is a type of yeast that's found in bread, especially in unleavened bread, that when it starts to mold, it creates a toxin that can make you hallucinate before you get sick and you die. And that they believe that this yeast toxin could be another effect that made people think they could fly, or they were cast under a spell by somebody. So yeah. Watch what you eat, because you could become it. Okay, number 8. Yes, the first recording of witches were actually in the Bible. So, yeah, King Saul is the dude in the Bible. Okay, King Saul was one of the rulers of the Christian lands and stuff. I think around the Byzantine era and the Persian era, I think. I'm pretty sure it was that after Emperor Constantine. But King Saul, he sought the first witch, okay? And this documentation of the Bible was actually written in 931 BC to 721 BC. This is from the original Hebrew Old Testament Bible, right? And so King Saul sought the witch of Endor to help him raise Samuel's spirit from the dead, to help him defeat the Philistine army. Now, the Philistines, they were just a bunch of reckless brutes. They didn't care what they trashed. They didn't care what they raped, pillaged, nothing. That's why if somebody calls you a Philistine, it's actually a very high insult. Okay? So, the witch of Endor did bring back the spirit of Samuel to talk to King Saul. And basically, Sam prophesied that King Saul and his sons were all going to die within the next 24 hours. And wouldn't you know, the sons went into battle. They were some of the generals that were leading their dad's army. And when he found out that all of his sons fell in battle, King Saul, out of grief, did away with himself. So, yeah. So it's a weird, creepy, and strange story. And this is, yeah, the first documented witch in anything that could be considered remotely historical text. Number 9. Remember how I said everybody practices witchcraft? Well, atheists and nihilists do too. Why this is a weird, creepy, and strange fact is because a lot of people, okay, with atheists, it's like they believe in a universal energy, but they don't put a face to it, you know, like a deitic face to it, like God or gods and goddesses, a pantheon of some sort. And nihilists, they believe we came from nothing, we will go back to nothing, and everything here pretty much means nothing. Okay? And so when people hear of atheists and nihilists practicing magic, they go, what? It kind of gives them a mind freak. Here's the thing. Atheists can believe in energy, and a lot of atheists, that's what they do. They believe in the energy of the universe. Kind of along the way of Buddhism, except without the Buddhist disciples that go with it, and the Buddha itself to go with it. But they believe in karma and universal energy usually. So of course they'll do rituals and things to make their energy better and higher. Nihilists, it's part of the practice of since all this doesn't really mean anything, I can practice and kind of push my weight around the universe to help me make things that I want to have happen today. So when you really sit down and talk to these people and get to know the rationale behind their practices, it's pretty practical. But so yeah, everybody practices magic. Number 10. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, okay, the largest recorded gathering of people dressed up as witches. Now, I mean like witches as we depict them today, like with the hat and the black cloak and the long flowing, robes and all that sort of stuff with the broom and all that sort of stuff. That sort of witch, okay? But the largest recorded gathering of people dressed up as witches is 1,607. Now, this happened at a festival in 2013 in Sortlaida, Spain. So, yes, much of Spain and Portugal are very much, yes, there's a lot of Catholicism, but there's also a lot of connection of pagan roots and things. So a lot of people will practice different Hispanic variations of Santeria. And Santeria combines Catholicism and witchcraft. Okay? Kind of like the Enochians. Okay? But yeah, so they have this festival, and I guess the biggest attendance that was recorded was in 2013. And I personally think that's kind of cool, but some people might find that weird, creepy, and strange if they don't like witches. So there you go. Number 11. The number of practicing witches are on the rise, okay? For example, it was like 8,000 practicing witches in 2008 in the United States. This is the United States, okay? In 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, that number turned into 1.4 million in the U.S., and by 2020, it turned to 3.9 million in the U.S. Now, what makes this a weird, creepy, and strange fact is that anytime the world goes to see cataclysmic unrest, people get interested in magic. Okay? It's a thing that helps us cope with the sense of hopelessness that we have inside of us. Okay? And so you'll see a revival of Wicca, okay? You'll see a revival of paganism. You'll see people purposely trying to find out about their inherited roots, like, I don't know, Ancestry.com. Yeah, that sort of thing, so that they can practice the rituals and things that their ancestors did to try and get a better grasp on life. So it's kind of weird and creepy because of the psychology that goes behind that. It's kind of the last breath before mass hysteria, unfortunately. If you go and you look through the cycles of time and you track the influx, the rise and fall of popularity of magic worldwide, and what cataclysmic things happen in history, that cycle kind of goes around. So yeah. Practicing witches are on the rise, so maybe it'd be time to pay attention to your surroundings. Number 12, the first ballet and the first official Western novel were both inspired by witches as the main heroines. So I found this kind of cute and kind of interesting. But yeah, witches have always enchanted us because something mystical and just magical and everything. That idea that this beautiful creature can just make miracles happen and make things appear out of thin air has always been something enchanting to us, especially when it comes to partners in life or gods and goddesses. So the fact that Circe, which is one of the goddesses of the circle of the moon, ended up being the main heroine of the first ballet ever recorded, and Celestia ended up being the name and main heroine of the first Western novel ever written. Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. And it kind of ties right along with the number 11, magic provides an escapism from things that are out of our control, which some people might find creepy. So, yeah. And last but not least, number 13. Wiccans can be pagans, but not all pagans are Wiccans. Okay? Here's the thing. So, paganism was established in 1325 originally. All right? And it was a way for the Romans that were starting to, really, really get into the whole gung-ho Christian thing at this point. It was a way for the Romans to identify the village people and the rural people out in the country that still worship their multiple gods and stuff, and basically said screw you to the Christian church, to the Catholic Church, In fact, in Latin, it means rural people who worship false gods. That's what paganism means. And even furthermore, heathens, which are a lot of our Celtic and Viking descendants, the word heathen means pagans that totally denied Abrahamic religions. Like so the pagans, they would tolerate it so that they don't, get burned or sacked or imprisoned or whatever. But the heathens, no, these people would go to war to keep their faith. And their faith was nothing Abrahamic, not Judaism, not Christianity, not Islam. None of the monotheistic big three was in their bag. It was not in their wheelhouse. And they were willing to die for it. They were willing to rape and pillage for it to get to the point that you need to leave them alone. And a lot of our Viking ancestors were in that heathen category because they're Vikings, They thought of themselves as the ultimate people. So why would they give in? So over the years, paganism as a term has become an umbrella term for people that believe in a magical system that is more inherited from the people than from the government. Okay, so it's a very umbrella term. Now, Wicca is actually pretty young in the world. Okay, so there was this guy in the UK. His name was Gerald Gardner, and he, in the 50s, he came into his own as a man and everything. He was looking around. And at this point, the temples of light, the OTO temples, the ones that Aleister Crowley and Rider Waite helped establish, they were there. But there was so much hierarchy and pomp and circumstances and some of the rituals were very gruesome and primal, and a lot of the people that could afford to be inducted into these temples were rich people. Remember, Aleister Crowley came from a very wealthy family, so did Rider-Waite. Both Rider and Waite came from wealthy families. So, yeah, basically that style of alchemy was for the aristocracy. And they kind of denoted and debased women, and he was not about that. So Gerald Gardner, he's kind of running around hippie, roughshod around the UK and stuff in different groves and woods and stuff. And he's like, you know what? I want to start a religion that is for the common people, that focuses on magic and respect for Mother Nature and worships the triple goddess, worships the cycle of nature and creation. And thusly, he came up with the word Wicca in the 1970s. It established many books. He established different organizations and churches. I shouldn't say churches, temple houses, because for Wiccan faith, the woods is your church. So yes, in that way, Wiccans can be pagans, because the whole concept of pagan was for the common rural people, the common people, to worship and exist in nature and practice magic outside of the reform structure of aristocracy and the leadership roles. So that's the difference between Wiccans, pagans, and heathens, basically. I found that very interesting, and it can be weird, creepy, and strange, because a lot of people will say they're part of one and really get pissed off if you tell them they're another. And I just find it really weird, creepy, and strange that people will go completely against what they say they believe in just to prove that they are not what you say they are. So, but yeah. So, alrighty. Well, 13 facts about witches. Probably not the facts you were thinking of, because the really creepy, gruesome lessons or things that they say through history about witches are completely bogus, false nonsense. It honestly, majority of the stuff, I think, is stuff that was created out of bored minds. I mean, you're talking about majority of things that we fantasize witches to be is from that era of the Salem witch trials and King James I. And so you're talking about the era of Puritans, where they really didn't have a whole lot to do. And this gave them some sort of release, and it gave them some sort of imaginary thing to control people with, that they can really take people to the cleaners with. So, but I hope you guys found that educational and informative. And if you have any more questions or comments about it, please don't hesitate to contact me. That would be awesome. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.